Hello once again, everyone. So we're going to be continuing on with our series about Fiore's Posta Oppositions. Joining me once again is Jake, my resident Italian. And we're going to be now moving on to the next page. We're going to tackle our next four guards. So, firstly, we're going to come across Posta Longa versus Mezza Porta di Ferro. So let's talk about the attributes of this. So, if I take Posta Longa and Jake moves into Mezza Porta di Ferro, we have an aggressive long-reaching guard versus a more defensive, still relatively long-reaching guard. Now the idea here is that, number one, just like we talked about before, I really don't have a whole lot to worry about since he's made himself open. So it's very good for me to go ahead and start with my attack, because the only thing he can immediately hit if he goes for me is clacking my hands, which won't stop that tip going forward. Especially if he is targeting my hands, he may not even be able to stop my body from going forward. So it is in his best interest to adopt a defensive measure for the first action. But let's talk about my aggressive actions. So my tip should be moving. I should not be standing here stock still. I should already be kind of starting to seek. My legs are nice and bent. I'm ready to go. There are two lines that I can attack on. I can either attack over his right leg with a passere of my own, boom. Or if I choose to, I can also go to the outside of his sword since it's in the center of his body with a passere a little bit more out. Either one is completely fine. You'll do whatever you need to do. Kind of depends upon how much inclined to the middle his Mezza Porta di Ferro is. But I'll just show that a couple times, and I'll bounce just between them. So, boom, boom, and one more each. Boom, and then finally, boom. Nothing really complicated. So against this, Jake has three kinds of beats that he can do. If I attack over this side of his line, it's best for him to use the false edge coming up to knock my sword aside. If I come over this line, it's best for him to use the true edge, since it has that attribute of going to the side. And again, if I come this way, you can also do it here, it can use the flat a bit more than the edge, but we'll go over that again in a moment. So let's look at the initial deflections. So, I am going over his right arm, meaning he can use his false edge to knock it aside, and then he can return with a falling blow to my arms or head, however deep I get, really. Nice and straightforward. We'll show that a couple times, then we'll go to the next one. So I go for it, and he gets that arm. One more time. No problem, really. Now, if I go for the other side, it is best for him to use his true edge, since employing his false edge here won't make a favorable angle. So he just brings his long edge up, almost like he's going into frontale, to get a little bit of sideways beat, and then returns with a falling blow to my head or arms, as before. Boom. Problem. Nothing really difficult there. Now, for the flat beat, this is something that more me and my people do, but it is certainly a great attribute for it, is this can be good if they're going a bit more directly down the middle, or if they're going here. He's going to swing that sword almost sideways, but the idea behind it is he's just looking to kind of skip me out of the way. The benefit of this is that his sword will basically replace mine on the line, and he will have usually an immediate thrust or cut available to him. So I attack, right in the middle. Nothing really to worry about. So that is also an option, though Fiore doesn't constrain. So, those are his actions. I come in with thrust, he beats it to whatever side it needs to go, returns the falling blow to me. How do I escape? That's going to depend upon where I get moved. So, let's go over it from this side first. So, I attack in, he beats me aside. My best bet is, since my arms are moving the way they were before, as he tries to come back with falling blow, go ahead and pull those back. You can also go back into Finestra. It kind of depends upon how deep you are to get that cover. You could also attempt a tutta volta like we did before, but given how narrow we are currently deflecting against each other, that you're probably not going to have the time to do that. So instead, it's best to just go ahead and pull back off of it. This time I'm going to go Finestra. So I extend, boom. Just fold it back as soon as you get it. One more time on that. Just to cover my hands. Nothing crazy. I will then most likely leave. Second option, I'm coming around this side. This side, definitely I want to go ahead and stick in, since I can bring my dominant side back down. I attack in, boom, right back down into more Posta Breve, which gives me a much better option of defense. And from there, I might be able to fight off of this. He might be able to fight off this. Certainly, if I'm stepping a little closer to him, we'll be more in the close range game, but I am keeping distance for safety. So, here's that again. I attack. Just over into Posta Breve. I might get a shot. We might end up in grappling. Either way, nothing too complicated. So, that's kind of how these two boil down to each other. He's got a guard that's great for knocking things aside. I've got a guard that's great for attacking. The only thing we haven't gone over is my aggressive option, if I can keep it going. So, for this, what's going to happen is when I launch out my attack, I know he's going to take that tempo to defend himself. Since my tip is already moving, just duck underneath and go to your next option, in which case he now does the same defensive thing I was just doing. He brings it back. Hey, now we're in the close range game, exactly as a close range bind. Or alternatively, on the other side, I attack. Now again, we're in the close range game, just he has a slightly different opening than I do. So nothing too complicated in this regard, and it does settle us quite well. So we'll show that all progressive in one go, and then we'll go on to our next two posta. So first, me attacking on a post from Posta Longa. I attack on this side. I attack on this side. Nothing complicated. Now Jake can beat my sword aside to whatever side I go. Boom, falling blow to header arms. Then the other side. Boom, falling blow to header arms. Now, I'll do the passive version where I'm going to escape following his attack. So, boom, boom, I just leave. Or on the other side, boom, boom, I just leave. Nothing bad. Now the aggressive version, I stick in on it, so I attack. I go around, either hitting him or causing him to have to defend. We'll go that one again. So, attack. He defends, we're now in the close range bind. Or on the other side, I attack. Now we're in the close range bind on the other side. Nothing too complicated. Good fight for both guards. They'll probably end up in closing action if these actions actually happen, because you're really going to be going for each other with close stuff. So if you get those covers, while we're ending up more in the true, close range start, you may also find yourself more in these sorts of positions, or even all the way hilt to hilt in whatever configuration. Just kind of depends. Now, for our next two posta, we're going to move into a bit of an odd one. And admittedly, if you're following along with my theory, these ones are probably the most difficult to fit into my theory. That being that the guards are set apart from each other to teach you a specific lesson. But I do still think there is a lesson here. So, if the lesson before was, he's open, you should attack with your thrust, since you're in a thrust-oriented guard, this one is more about you're both standing in an aggressive guard. What happens if you both choose to attack? Because both guards in this case attack in the same way and can cause slightly different responses. So, for this, I go into Posta Breve, and Jake will take the oh-so-famous Dente de Chingao. So, first off, let's talk about which one should attack first. Either can, and both of them are focused on being aggressive guards. So, in this case, since Fiore specifically mentions it is dangerous for me to wait if I am standing in Posta Breve, I probably should attack first, since I don't want to be standing here for too long. And this is also a situation where if you follow his advice about this works better with a longer sword, you will definitely feel that when facing this guard. But my tip is once again moving, same as it was before. I can attack with a passere or without, kind of depends upon my range. I'll go ahead and do the passing step. Now as to how far should I extend my arms, they are locked to me right now. I can move into Posta Longa on my attack, and that would certainly give me some range. Not necessarily always guaranteed, especially if we're talking about if you're wearing armor, which is another thing this guard is apt to do. We're going to go the full bloss, and I'm going to go ahead and use my extension. So, I go ahead and attack in, boom, with just a passere, almost the same as when Posta Longa happened. Nothing really to write home about. So since I'm going at him, and he is ready to knock things aside, now it should be noted that with this being the aggressive version of Dente, he doesn't actually describe knocking things aside with this guard. But Jake has no other option since I'm coming at him first. So it's in his best interest to do like he will do with the lower version later, knock it aside, and then just strike with a falling blow to the arms or to the head, depending upon how close I get. Nothing too complicated there. I attack in, he hits. So, how can I escape from this? This is where it can be kind of interesting. Depending upon how I extend my arms, if I put my arms out at greater distance, that means I can attack from further away, meaning he will most likely have my arm as a target as opposed to my head. This means that if I just remember to return to Posta Breve, I don't necessarily have to worry a whole lot about my footwork. So what I mean by this is, if I attack more with my arms and with a smaller passing step, the only thing he can currently hit is my arm. So if I just make sure to return to Posta Breve as he tries to come down, I can guide his sword out of the way and end up in a rather favorable position, from which I can then launch thrusts, etc. If I add the tornare back to that, I pretty much reset entirely. So here's that going. No harm to me, no harm to him. Not a bad way to escape. Alternatively, if I am deep enough that he's going for my head, then it is in my best interest to go ahead and move into the close range game, as I'm not getting back out of here. So what would that look like? So I go ahead and move in a bit deeper. Boom. I'm going to go ahead and want to bring my sword over. At the same time, I'd like to step forward if I can. Kind of depends on how brave you feel and how good of a parry you get. In this case, I'm out here. This isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. We're now in the close range game, but our bind is on the other side. I have a much better route against Jake than he does. Now, alternatively, I'll try to pass on this one. We'll see how it goes. I attack in. In this case, now I'm even closer, and we get all the stuff we want. And the reason I can achieve that parry, even though I'm not going back to this Posta Breve, I am still going back to Posta Breve with my arms. It's just my Breve is up here, rather than down here now. So to just talk about that for a second, I believe that every single guard is meant to give you an idea of a structural mechanic, right? I don't think that every fenestra is supposed to look exactly like this, or every postidon is supposed to look exactly like this. Heck, we get two versions of that one, right? We even get this version, right? I think that in the case of Posta Breve, it's about teaching you to solidify and keep your arms close to you. And we do see that motion in other fighting systems. One of the most prolific in this case being Codex Wallenstein. They show that shape specifically in their winding, usually as a counteraction to someone trying to do something along the blade. So in this case, to break it down one more time, when I attack in and he parries me, boom, well, if he parries me, boom, all I need to do to make sure that I can defend against this close range is by shortening up my arms, I get a lot more power here than you would think. Like, Jake isn't swinging particularly slowly, he's not trying to kill me, but I've got a lot better bind than you would expect because my arms are out. Sorry, in. If I left my arms out, I don't get as much leverage and probably will have to cover higher, which is not in my advantage because it can slip by. This allows me to still control the center line by basically tying my sword more to me, which if there's anything Posta Breve is pretty good at, it's that. First time I encountered it, I couldn't move it. And I was like, wow, this guard is something else. And that's what I personally see this as really trying to teach you. Keep your attacks short and simple. If he deflects it, seek the next opening as you know. If he comes back in, shorten again to get that pressure. Now, let's talk about the flip side. He attacks me. So in this case, because of the position I'm standing in, it is in his best interest to attack on this line rather than this line. He can also attack a little more up the center if he wants and try and knock out my tip, etc. But we don't want to be going for the sword since my tip is moving. So it's better for him to threaten me over here. Now, he goes ahead and launches that attack. I have something now coming up at my face. It's not in my best interest to try and extend back at him. I am better off bringing my tip around, which lends very well to his game plan. So, we now find ourselves in a situation where I am falling into the dente trap. That being, draw out my arms, cut me in the head or arms, usually the arms. Now again, if we were talking about Posta Longa, this would be pretty much a win for him, right? And we'll also see that when Dente fights other guards, that I've talked about before, right? Normally, if he attacks, we'll find ourselves in a position where our arms extend out, thus giving him a nice, easy target. But if we use that principle of, Dente making, Breve making you stronger without needing to extend, I can actually parry this shot without having to move all that much. He throws that thrust in, I've got a lot of strength, right? I can even do that parry smaller, which means that now he has to go for a deeper target, which in turn, since I'm keeping it locked to me, rather than this being a desperate 1-2, it turns much more into me just turning back on the center line. And now we find ourselves in a very good position. I am ready to do any of the long-range plays since I am left foot forward. Especially since I got this good parry, I can even go for deeper targets. If I want to as well with this, I could pass forward on my parry and definitely enter into the close range game. So here's that again. So he attacks on the outside, I parry it. I can now move in. I'm basically set to move in the frontale or any of the other things I want to go to because I moved out of breve rather than extension. So when these two guards fight each other, I don't see it as much as a perfect situation like the other ones were, and the other ones will be when we get to the next page next week. But I do see it much more along the lines of these two in particular are aggressive guards, and it's about using the best attributes of those guards. Dente is great about being able to deflect upward. It's also great about always moving into another threatening Fendente. At no point does Dente do something that is not threatening, right? Which is probably why Fiore liked it so much. Breve, on the other hand, is all about strength. It's about centering yourself and using that attribute to its best. And I see this also as an opportunity for a thought exercise. You know, all the postas can encounter each other. Now, some are obviously going to have better, off against certain ones, but they're all going to fight each other at some point, or something like it. These two, when they meet other guards, they just follow their normal attributes. But when they fight each other, it is a question of not the initial, what it says on the tin, but the further mechanics that it's given you. And so I think setting these across from each other can actually be a very good thought experiment, because if I change my guard, like if I move out of Breve into something else, he's going to win. If he moves out of Dente into something else, I might win. And so that can lead to both fencers really paying attention to what the guard's attributes are and using it to the best of their ability. I'm not saying that you have to always stay rigidly in whatever guard you start from, but if you had to, these are the kinds of things you want to be asking yourself, as it just gives you more information to use as a fencer. But otherwise, thank you very much, Jake. And thank you all very much for watching. Next week we move on to the final page. We'll be covering the last 4 posta, and it will be a lot of fun, so I'm really looking forward to those ones. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.